And now we move to business, where the Nigerian Federal Government has set up a committee of all stakeholders in the power sector to resolve the challenge of low gas supply to generation companies, which it says is responsible for the current poor power supply in parts of the country. Now, according to the Minister of Power Adebayo Adelabu, in a recent statement, the committee is expected to make recommendations that will address the gas supply and liquidity challenges in the sector. Now, joining me on the news is Olubusayo Amoo. She's Senior Manager, KPMG Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining me, Olubusayo.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
All right, now, we're actually aware that Nigeria has an abundance of gas reserves, but why do you think it is still unable to meet domestic supply needs for electricity?
Okay, so like you mentioned, there are a lot of issues that have plagued the power sector, and this is one of the reasons why we may say that gas supply for electricity purposes is still low. So what you have is that there are inefficiencies in the power sector. So gas suppliers supply gas to generating companies that are gas-fired, and we have quite a number of them compared to the hydro-powered generating companies. And when the gas-fired gencos produce electricity, they sell to the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, which then sells to the distribution companies, and then distribution companies sell to the final consumers. However, there are issues in terms of the distribution, such as metering issues, saboteurs, and so on. So at the end of the day, the funds that the distribution companies get back for the distribution of electricity is insufficient for them to meet their obligations to NBET, and then NBET in turn is unable to meet some of its obligations to the GENCOs, and the GENCOs are also unable to meet some of their obligations to the gas suppliers. So at the end of the day, you have gas suppliers being reluctant to supply to the GENCOs for electricity generation purposes. You also have issues with infrastructure. So there are limitations in terms of infrastructure for gas processing and supply. We also have economic factors favoring flaring over investment in gas capturing, because gas capturing can actually be very capital intensive. So sometimes gas flaring is actually favored over making those investments in gas capturing.
All right, Olubusayo.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, talking about electricity generation, we now have states that are actually working to generate and sell their own electricity. States like Oyo, Lagos, and other states. How possible will that be? How realistic is it even?
Okay, so I think it's definitely a welcome development, because what it means is that we would have increased energy access in Nigeria, and also there'll be diversification of energy sources. However, there are several factors that these states have to consider to be able to make this development realistic and feasible, such as the development of relevant legal and regulatory framework, because it's important to have very solid, effective, and practical legal and regulatory frameworks that would attract investors. It's a very technical sector, so we also need strong technical capacity in terms of from the operators and from the regulators to be able to have a sustainable electricity generation process in those states. Financial resources as well. We have a lot of states that are still struggling to meet up with salary obligations and so on. So like I already mentioned, the capital, the generating electricity is very capital intensive. So these states will actually require a lot of financial resources. And then you also have political will, where state governments are still struggling with a lot of issues.
All right, away from
grassroots issues, it may be difficult for them to actually implement.
Now, away from the states, Nigeria has actually installed electricity generating capacity of about over 13,000 megawatts. And, gas-fired power plants are relatively cheaper to operate than other fossil fuel alternatives available. But can you tell us what are the factors that are actually inhibiting investments especially in building fully functional plants to ensure adequate supply of gas for the country that we should actually know about?
Okay, so we have infrastructure constraints. So there are a lot of infrastructure required for you to have fully functional gas plants. So in terms of, so when I say infrastructure, I mean the pipelines, processing facilities, and so on. We also have issues with security. There are a lot of gas-rich regions that have security issues and concerns, which also need to be addressed. Then there are financing challenges too. I've mentioned several times that it's a capital-intensive sector, so a lot of finances are actually involved and need to be committed. So financial challenges are also one of the reasons that we're unable to maximize the potential.
Olubusayo, now let's take a look at how vast Nigeria is. What specific renewable energy sources, the likes of solar and also wind, would you say are most suitable for different regions? And how do you expect their integration to actually be financed?
Okay, so Nigeria is a country that's blessed with a lot of natural resources, including the renewable energy sources. So you have solar energy as a major option. We have a lot of sunlight, be it in the north, in the south, the east, or the west. So this is one renewable energy source that I think Nigeria can harness. We also have wind energy. We have coastal regions. We have a lot of states with coastal regions and specific wind patterns, which would be viable for wind farms for the production and generation of electricity. Then we have hydropower as well. We have large bodies of water around all over in certain areas in Nigeria, which can also be harnessed for the purpose of generation of electricity. We have biomass energy. We have biofuels, and we also have geothermal energy in the north, which can be used for electricity and energy production.
All right, well, thank you so much, Olubusayo, for joining me and speaking on this.